Your secure data might not be safe after all. Microsoft's Copilot, powered by generative AI, can unintentionally expose sensitive files due to mislabeling or incorrect permissions. In this video, we'll guide you step by step on using Microsoft Purview to ensure that Copilot doesn't access what it shouldn't. Don't risk letting your data fall into the wrong hands. Why Copilot changes the game for data security. Imagine this. An AI assistant pulls up a sensitive HR document you didn't even know existed during a completely unrelated project. You weren't looking for it, and your query had no mention of HR or anything similar, yet here it is, surfaced right in front of you. That's the power and the potential risk of Microsoft Copilot's advanced search capabilities. Let's break down how this happens. Copilot doesn't work like traditional search tools you might be used to, like typical search boxes or file explorers, where you need to know specific terms or file names to find what you need. Copilot leverages something called semantic search. Instead of searching by exact keywords, it understands the meaning behind your query and looks for content that aligns with it, even if the exact phrase you used doesn't appear in the document. It's like Copilot reads between the lines of your files, matching intent with content. While this is incredibly powerful, it also opens the door to significant data security challenges. Here's where things can get complicated. Because Copilot works based on meaning, it can find files or information you didn't even realize were accessible to you. This becomes a problem when permissions or file configurations aren't set correctly. For example, if your SharePoint environment has overly broad permission settings, like the all-too-common everyone except external users option, Copilot can unintentionally surface files that were never meant to be widely accessed. Imagine working on a routine marketing project and suddenly a confidential salary report appears in your search results. Even if you didn't intend to see that information, the system's search capabilities made it possible. To understand why this is a problem, let's compare Copilot's semantic search with traditional search tools. With a traditional search system, users need to know specific keywords to retrieve a file. For example, if you're looking for an HR document, you'd have to type the exact file name or at least a close approximation with relevant keywords like HR guidelines or payroll data. If you don't use the correct terms, the file won't show up in your results. This acted as a kind of unintentional safeguard. Sensitive files that you didn't know existed or didn't know how to find were essentially hidden, even if they were technically accessible. Copilot completely changes this equation. By leveraging semantic indexing through advanced embedding models, Copilot can figure out the meaning behind your query, create a sort of concept map of your files, and pull up anything that matches, even if no keywords match directly. Here's how it works. Copilot essentially turns your query and your data into mathematical vectors. These vectors represent meaning rather than precise words. When you search for team salary details, for example, Copilot might surface files that contain contextual information like compensation breakdowns or budgeting spreadsheets, even if the word salary isn't directly mentioned. This is extremely useful for productivity, but can also lead to serious oversights. One major contributing factor to this issue is something known as over-permissioning. Over-permissioning happens when users, groups, or even entire sites are given more access than they actually need. This might happen because permissions were assigned quickly without much thought to specifics, or because settings like everyone except external users make sharing easier in the short term. While this convenience is tempting, it can amplify risks when AI tools like Copilot enter the picture. That's because Copilot doesn't know whether information is sensitive. It processes and retrieves based on access permissions alone. If the configuration is wrong, sensitive data could easily slip through the cracks. Let's go back to our earlier example of the HR document appearing during an unrelated project. Say the document in question was stored in a SharePoint site that was configured with broad sharing permissions. Even if site owners thought the data was secure, misaligned configuration might mean files and their context were included in Copilot's semantic index. Once that happens, there's little preventing those files from being surfaced by users conducting unrelated searches. This isn't just an inconvenience. It can lead to compliance risks, employee privacy breaches, or sensitive business information reaching unintended audiences. At this point, the difference between traditional search systems and Copilot-based semantic search should be clear. Traditional systems act more as retrieval tools where users need to know what they're looking for, while Copilot allows users to discover information based on context. This shift brings incredible productivity advantages, but also highlights a critical need for more robust tools and practices to close security gaps. Without account-level checks and labeling at scale, the risks of misconfigured or overly broad permissions multiply quickly. Of course, these challenges aren't insurmountable. With the right steps and tools, organizations can maintain control over their data while harnessing Copilot's capabilities. Effective measures start with understanding where sensitive data might already be exposed so you can get ahead of the issue before breaches occur. But before we dive into specific tools and techniques for addressing these risks, it's worth emphasizing how these missteps in configurations compound compliance issues. For companies operating under strict regulatory requirements like HIPAA for healthcare, GDPR in the European Union, or financial compliance rules like SOX, a failure to protect sensitive data can lead to disastrous consequences. Companies could face legal fines, lose client trust, or damage their reputation within their industry. These risks aren't theoretical either. Across industries, seemingly minor configuration issues have led to headlines about leaked data or breached systems. Given Copilot's ability to surface files across various silos and systems without relying on specific terms, even small gaps in your data governance can open up huge vulnerabilities. The good news is that the risks posed by Copilot's semantic index can be managed and even mitigated with the proper tools and practices. Microsoft provides integrated solutions designed to help organizations address these very challenges. For example, tools like Microsoft Purview empower you to label sensitive information, define access levels, and enforce restrictions that Copilot must adhere to. When implemented effectively, these tools prevent misconfigured settings from causing broader data exposure. And the best part, addressing these concerns as part of your data governance strategy can help keep productivity flowing while protecting your sensitive documents. So, how do you get started? The first step is to understand your data landscape. Specifically, where your sensitive and regulated data resides and how accessible it is today. This involves identifying shared folders, sites, and files that might already be over-permissioned or publicly accessible within your organization. Once you know which areas are at risk, you can focus on applying structured strategies to tighten permissions and streamline access management. Protecting your data starts with finding where it's exposed. That's exactly what we're going to look at next. How SharePoint configurations put your data at risk. Did you know that misconfigured SharePoint settings could grant Copilot unintended access to files meant for your eyes only? It's an issue that often goes unnoticed, but it can have significant consequences when AI is introduced into your organization's workflows. To understand how this happens, we need to take a closer look at common oversharing configurations in SharePoint and how they become a risk. One of the most frequent oversharing mistakes involves using broad access sharing settings, such as links set to everyone except external users. While this might seem harmless since it blocks external users, it can lead to unintended exposure internally. This setting essentially grants access to anyone in your organization. When Copilot starts indexing these files using its semantic search capabilities, it doesn't just consider the files you directly interacted with. Instead, it processes everything within its reach based on existing permissions. If those permissions include shared HR documents, confidential client data, or unfinished drafts with sensitive information, Copilot gains access to those as well and can surface them in response to user queries, even if the user had no intention of accessing such files. For example, consider a situation where a SharePoint site with sensitive budget plans is configured using anyone with the link permissions to make file sharing more convenient. While it may suit collaboration needs in the short term, this opens up a loophole. If Copilot scans the semantic meaning of that budget file and connects it to a user's query, say something generic like next quarter's initiatives, it could display portions of that budget plan during unrelated projects. In this case, the user didn't explicitly search for it, but Copilot's advanced index logic matched the intent of their search with the file. This kind of oversharing often isn't intentional, but it underscores how small permission missteps can lead to large risks, particularly when automation and AI are involved. Another common point of vulnerability lies in the privacy settings of SharePoint sites themselves. Sites set as public give every user in the organization automatic access. When Copilot integrates with these systems, it scans these public sites alongside others, broadening its ability to lift even non-obvious files into search results. Compounding the problem is the fact that site owners don't always realize the scope of public settings in larger organizations. Documents stored in these sites might not be monitored closely, leaving room for inappropriate or overshared files to remain unchecked. This is where SharePoint Advanced Management comes into play. Part of Microsoft 365, this tool provides functionality to address oversharing issues at the source. One of the primary features it offers is the Data Access Governance DAG report. This report helps SharePoint administrators identify which sites are too broadly shared, pinpointing sites with dangerous oversharing permissions or mistakenly elevated user access. Administrators can then see specifically which users and groups have access, allowing them to address these risks before they lead to larger problems. With this visibility, they can adjust potentially harmful sharing links or overly permissive site privacy settings. SharePoint Advanced Management also offers a restricted access control feature to mitigate these risks. This allows admins to enforce stricter site-level access controls, locking down sites with sensitive content until permissions can be reviewed and corrected. For instance, if your organization identifies a series of overshared financial plans, restricted access can immediately cut users off from the files until the permissions are fixed. The system ensures no one, including Copilot, can gain access to the sites during the restriction period. With additional options like PowerShell commandlets, IT personnel can implement and manage these access controls efficiently, even across large-scale SharePoint environments. Another valuable capability of SharePoint Advanced Management is restricted content discovery. This allows organizations to take specific high-risk sites, such as those containing legal contracts, payroll data, or development roadmaps, and exclude them entirely from Copilot's indexing. Through a simple configuration command, admins can define these restrictions to ensure Copilot doesn't process or retrieve data from certain designated sites. Importantly, this feature doesn't remove permissions for users who already have access. Instead, it limits Copilot's ability to ground its searches with information from the restricted sites, which allows you to maintain granular control over what Copilot sees while keeping your overall permission structure intact. For organizations rolling out Copilot for the first time, another helpful feature in SharePoint Advanced Management is the ability to create a curated list of sites Copilot is allowed to access. By limiting its access to a preset collection of up to 100 sites, you can test how Copilot integrates with your workflows while ensuring it only interacts with approved areas of your SharePoint environment. This is an excellent way to maintain oversight as you develop a long-term governance strategy. You can monitor performance, understand access patterns, and make adjustments as needed, all while protecting the content you're not ready for Copilot to process. Even with these tools in place, it's critical to maintain proper oversight on site activity and access. Misconfigured sharing links aren't always easy to catch if administrators rely solely on default SharePoint interfaces. SharePoint Advanced Management provides clarity in this area by supplying detailed insights through its oversharing baseline reports. These reports reveal at a glance where your organization is at risk of data overexposure. For example, they can highlight cases where folders inheriting permissions from parent sites create cascading oversharing problems across multiple levels. This kind of misstep can often be overlooked in day-to-day management, but these tools bring them to light so they can be resolved. Although correcting site and sharing configurations is an essential step, site-level fixes alone aren't enough to fully secure your data. Incorrect file-level labeling, for instance, can undermine even the most robust site permissions. Think of file labels as your last line of defense. Without them, even perfectly configured sites could allow Copilot to access critical documents by accident. Data-level protections come into play here, ensuring that every file carries its appropriate restriction regardless of its surrounding permissions. That brings us to the limitations of focusing only on SharePoint configurations. While tools like SharePoint Advanced Management are excellent at exposing oversharing patterns at the site level, they don't address what's happening within the files themselves. Imagine sensitive legal contracts stored in a well-protected site that are mistakenly labeled as general when they should be tagged as confidential. Even if the broader permissions are correct, the absence of file-level protection means these contracts could still be exposed to Copilot if no additional safeguards are in place. This kind of scenario is why file-level protection matters so much when working with Copilot. Microsoft Purview, which we'll explore further in the next sections, allows organizations to classify content and enforce access limits directly at the document level. By tagging files with sensitivity labels like confidential or restricted, you ensure Copilot can only access and process files that align with its allowed parameters. These labels act as barriers, preventing AI tools and even humans from mishandling data tied to specific business contexts or compliance requirements. For now, the key takeaway is this. Addressing SharePoint configuration risks is a foundational step in keeping your data safe. By fixing site permissions, tightening sharing links, and leveraging capabilities within SharePoint Advanced Management, you can significantly reduce the chance of unintentional exposure. And while these measures go a long way toward securing your environment, they need to work hand in hand with file-level protections to provide full coverage. Next, we'll look at why file-level security is the real game changer when it comes to Copilot. Protecting data at the file layer ensures that even well-secured sites can't unintentionally allow sensitive information to leak. This is where tools like Microsoft Purview take center stage, offering the controls you need to apply restrictions consistently, regardless of how files might travel across your collaboration systems. Let's focus on securing your data at this critical level where the real magic happens. Why file-level protection is the key to securing Copilot. Permissions only go so far. File-level protection is your last line of defense when it comes to securing data for Copilot. This is because of how Copilot interacts with your organization's files. Its ability to perform deep semantic searches means it doesn't just look at file names or simple keywords. Instead, it analyzes the meaning behind your queries and matches that meaning to the content within your files. This advanced capability allows it to surface data that a traditional system might not even consider, but it also brings new challenges if sensitive information hasn't been properly classified or protected. Why is file-level protection so critical? Even if a site like SharePoint is locked down with carefully managed permissions, Copilot's deep search capabilities can still uncover sensitive files if those files don't have their own security measures. Permissions at the site level determine who can access an area within your infrastructure, but they don't always guarantee that individual files within that area are appropriately restricted. Without file-level safeguards, an internal user could unintentionally gain visibility into information they should never see, purely because Copilot matched their query with data embedded in a file. Consider this scenario. A locked-down SharePoint site contains sensitive financial reports. Permissions are tightly managed, and only specific teams have access to the site. However, the files themselves aren't labeled or protected at the document level. If Copilot processes these files as part of its semantic indexing, it may surface a confidential quarterly earnings projection in response to a query about budgeting, even from users outside the finance team. While the site permissions provide one layer of defense, the lack of file-level controls opens the door for unintended access. This is where Microsoft Purview comes into play. Purview offers robust file-level data protection tools designed to work seamlessly with modern AI workloads like Copilot. One of its key features is the ability to classify data based on sensitivity. This means you can categorize files into labels like public, confidential, or top secret. Once classified, Purview enforces access restrictions based on these labels, ensuring that sensitive documents remain secure. For instance, if a file is labeled confidential, only users with the appropriate permissions can view or interact with it, regardless of the site it's stored in. And crucially, this restriction applies to Copilot as well, effectively controlling how AI interacts with sensitive information. Purview's sensitivity labels go beyond just marking files for organizational convenience. They act as actionable security boundaries that govern how data can be accessed, shared, and processed. For example, a label might dictate that a document classified as confidential cannot be emailed externally, downloaded to an unmanaged device, or indexed by Copilot. These rules are built directly into Microsoft 365 tools, ensuring consistent enforcement no matter where the file travels within your system. Protecting sensitive documents like legal contracts, employee records, or customer data is one of the most important applications of file-level protection. Without sensitivity labels, even a well-secured site can't always prevent these kinds of documents from being inappropriately surfaced. Let's take legal documents as an example. A file outlining the details of an active litigation case could contain key terms and phrases that Copilot identifies as matching a routine employee inquiry about company disputes. If that file is incorrectly labeled or not labeled at all, it could inadvertently be presented as part of Copilot's search results. This exposes not only legal risks, but also reputational damage if sensitive information is mishandled or widely shared. Another important risk to consider involves financial reports. These files often contain granular details about company performance, future projections, or cost allocations that could provide valuable insights to competitors if viewed by the wrong audiences. Without file-specific protections, these reports might be indexed and processed by Copilot, appearing as results for users who shouldn't have access. Sensitivity labeling with Purview ensures reports like these remain protected, even if broader SharePoint configurations fail to provide sufficient coverage. Purview's capabilities don't just stop at sensitivity labels. It also includes tools for assessing your data landscape and identifying areas of risk. As part of its broader data security posture management, DSPM for AI, Purview offers data scanning and classification features that help organizations pinpoint sensitive files and ensure they are appropriately protected. For example, Purview assessments can flag files stored in SharePoint or OneDrive that contain sensitive information types such as social security numbers, financial account details, or protected health information. The system not only identifies these files, but also checks whether they are shared organization-wide or with external collaborators, providing a full picture of where your data might be overexposed. Once you've identified sensitive files, Purview makes it simple to apply sensitivity labels and ensure that these protections are consistently enforced. These labels integrate directly with Microsoft 365's larger security ecosystem, including tools like data loss prevention, DLP policies. DLP policies allow administrators to build granular rules dictating what Copilot can and cannot access. For example, a policy might block Copilot from processing any file labeled top secret or highly confidential. The enforcement of these policies happens automatically, aligning with the protections already set at the file level through Purview. Let's take an example of how this works in practice. Imagine there's a repository of internal audit reports labeled restricted through Purview. A policy is set that prevents Copilot from processing any files marked with this label. This ensures that even if a user's query closely matches the context contained in one of these reports, Copilot won't include it in its search results. What's more, the user would remain unaware that the document even exists, since it doesn't appear in Copilot's index. This kind of rule not only protects sensitive information, but also reinforces user confidence by ensuring Copilot adheres to organizational privacy guidelines. One of the key benefits of Purview is its adaptability. Sensitivity labels are customizable to fit the unique needs of any organization. For instance, you could create labels specifically tailored for different departments or data types. The finance department might use a label like internal financials only, while HR could implement labels like employee PII to protect personally identifiable information. These custom labels ensure that protections are built around the actual workflow of your organization rather than applying generic rules that may create bottlenecks or frustrate users. The ability to scale these protections across an entire enterprise is another strength of Purview. Through automated workflows, organizations can ensure that files are continuously scanned, labeled, and protected without requiring manual intervention for every new piece of data. For larger teams or companies generating vast amounts of information, this is critical. Manual labeling is not only time-consuming but also prone to errors, especially as data volumes grow. Automation provides consistency and ensures ongoing vigilance in protecting sensitive information. While Purview offers powerful tools for classifying and protecting data, it's important to align these technologies with clear operational policies. File-level protection is most effective when paired with a culture of data governance that emphasizes the importance of sensitivity labeling and adheres to best practices in data protection. Employees who handle sensitive documents should be trained to understand the purpose of sensitivity labels and the risks of mishandling unprotected files. This ensures that everyone in the organization becomes a participant in maintaining data security. It's also useful to periodically review and update your sensitivity labeling and file protection strategies. As new projects begin and data flows change, labels may need to be adjusted to accommodate emerging risks or shifting compliance requirements. Purview's insights and reports play a vital role here, helping organizations stay proactive about identifying and resolving gaps in file-level protections. File-level protection provides a safeguard that site-level security alone cannot achieve. By classifying data based on sensitivity and enforcing restrictions at the document level, organizations can prevent Copilot from exposing sensitive files. These protections serve as the final check to ensure sensitive information doesn't reach unintended audiences, even when Copilot is fully integrated into your workflow. Achieving effective file-level security starts with knowing what data is at the highest risk. In the next section, we'll explore how Microsoft Purview helps organizations identify that data and take the first step toward building a secure, AI-ready environment. Let's focus on finding and recognizing what needs protecting. How to identify sensitive data with Microsoft Purview. The first step to protecting your data? Knowing exactly what's at risk. Identifying sensitive data is critical, especially when tools like Copilot are added to your environment. Without a clear picture of where your sensitive files are stored and how they're configured, it's easy for data to become overexposed. Microsoft Purview offers comprehensive tools to help organizations identify and classify this data, providing the foundation for applying the right protections. Let's start with a quick overview of Purview's data security posture management features, often referred to as DSPM. Think of DSPM as a framework for understanding your data landscape. It guides you in assessing where sensitive information lives, who has access to it, and whether your configurations leave room for risks. With DSPM, you can examine your data systems holistically and pinpoint files or permissions that might have gone unnoticed. This type of proactive analysis is crucial in environments where AI tools like Copilot perform semantic searches across shared files. Here's the problem many organizations face: unlabeled and unprotected files that silently accumulate over time. Imagine a scenario where a company fails to properly tag or classify its sensitive data. Let's say financial spreadsheets detailing future budgets and revenue forecasts are saved in a broadly accessible SharePoint site, but aren't assigned any sensitivity labels. Without those labels in place, users with general site access and tools like Copilot can view these documents when they're surfaced in search results. This lack of proactive labeling could lead to compliance breaches or even competitive exposure, all because files weren't appropriately identified and secured. Purview's strength lies in its ability to scan for patterns and assign sensitivity labels to files containing regulated or critical data. Sensitivity labels are markers assigned to files to categorize and protect them based on the type of information they contain. For example, files can be labeled confidential, restricted, or public, depending on their sensitivity level. These labels aren't just descriptive, they actively control how data is accessed, shared, and used across your environment. If a file is labeled confidential, Purview applies enforcement policies to limit who can access it and what actions they can perform, regardless of where the file is stored. The process starts with Purview scanning your data to identify sensitive information types. Microsoft Purview includes a wide range of built-in sensitive information types that help detect data containing structured elements like social security numbers, credit card details, or medical terms. This built-in functionality is particularly powerful for organizations subject to regulations like GDPR, HIPAA, or PCI DSS because it automatically maps files to compliance requirements. If your team works with sensitive customer details, for instance, these information types can help pinpoint files that require immediate protection. Purview doesn't stop with pre-built sensitive information types. It also allows organizations to create custom information types tailored to their specific needs. For example, a tech company might define a sensitive information type for proprietary product designs, while a school district might classify student performance records. By enabling custom definitions, Purview gives organizations flexibility in adapting to their unique data requirements. This adaptability ensures critical files across industries can be recognized, properly labeled, and secured against unauthorized access, especially by tools like Copilot. For even more precision, Purview includes exact data match, EDM classifiers. EDM classifiers allow organizations to classify files by looking for exact matches on predefined data values like customer account numbers or employee IDs. These classifiers ensure a high degree of accuracy, minimizing false positives during sensitive data scans. By focusing on exact matches rather than general patterns, EDM classifiers protect data with greater confidence. For example, an exact data match can identify and secure a document containing a specific social security number, preventing accidental access or processing by Copilot. In industries like finance or healthcare, where accuracy is paramount, EDM classifiers add an essential layer of security. One of Purview's most powerful capabilities is its trainable classifiers, which use machine learning to identify files based on their structure and content. Think of it as teaching the system how to recognize specific types of data. For example, if your organization handles legal contracts, you can upload examples of past contracts to train Purview. It learns the patterns and nuances of these documents, enabling it to recognize and categorize similar files going forward. This is particularly useful for unstructured data or files that don't fit neatly into predefined sensitive information types. Trainable classifiers expand your ability to detect and protect a diverse range of content, offering more comprehensive coverage for complex data environments. So what does this look like in practice? Let's say a company uses Purview to scan its SharePoint libraries and OneDrive accounts. The scan identifies financial reports, internal HR memos, and customer databases scattered across various sites. Instead of relying on manual review processes, Purview automates the identification of tens of thousands of files containing sensitive information. For each file, the system applies a sensitivity label based on pre-configured policies. HR files might be assigned the label Employee PII, financial reports might receive Restricted, and marketing data could be tagged as General or Public. Once labeled, these files now have an additional layer of built-in protection to ensure Copilot or any user adheres to the organization's data privacy rules. Another key feature of Purview is its ability to perform data assessments across repositories to identify misconfigured files. Misconfigured data often poses a significant risk. Everyone with the link sharing permissions we talked about earlier can allow sensitive files to spread across your system uncontrolled. Purview assessments identify data that's improperly shared or lacks the correct protection. For example, it might flag a confidential roadmap document stored in a public-facing SharePoint folder, alerting administrators to quickly secure it before it's mistakenly accessed or exposed. The insights Purview provides during these assessments allow administrators to act immediately. If sensitive files are discovered in overly accessible areas, IT teams can limit their exposure by quickly applying the appropriate sensitivity labels and permissions. This systematic approach is especially valuable for large organizations dealing with hundreds of thousands of files. It removes much of the guesswork from securing data and provides confidence that critical documents won't be unintentionally accessed or processed by Copilot's AI. Building on this, sensitivity labels enable seamless integration across Microsoft 365 tools. Once a file is labeled in Purview, the label's protections are enforced everywhere the file is stored or accessed, whether that's SharePoint, Teams, or even in email. For example, a confidential file could have protections that prevent it from being shared outside the organization, downloaded onto unmanaged devices, or indexed by Copilot. These rules follow the file so that even if it's moved to a different library or shared with another team internally, the proper protections stay intact. This ensures consistency across your data environment and greatly reduces security gaps. But Purview's sensitivity labels don't just prevent unauthorized access. When applied to files proactively, they act as guardrails for Copilot's AI processing. Labels establish clear boundaries for what AI tools like Copilot can and cannot analyze. For example, a label that restricts employees from sharing certain HR files externally will also block those files from being indexed by Copilot. By linking sensitivity labels to AI access policies, administrators can confidently deploy Copilot without worrying about it surfacing files that should remain hidden. Identifying sensitive data is the first step towards securing it, and Purview provides organizations with everything they need to achieve that goal. Through automated scans, sensitivity labels, and insightful assessments, you gain a clear understanding of what your critical data looks like, where it resides, and how it's being shared. This foundation is essential for applying the next layer of security, protecting your files so that only the right people and the right tools, like Copilot, have access. Now that we know what needs protecting, let's look at how to apply those protections. Microsoft Purview offers powerful tools for labeling and securing files, creating a fortified environment for your organization's most valuable information. Let's dive into the next steps to ensure your sensitive data is fully protected. Applying sensitivity labels to protect critical data. Labels might sound simple, but they're the key to keeping Copilot in check. When configured correctly, sensitivity labels act as a safeguard, defining exactly who and what can access your organization's data. In the context of Copilot, these labels ensure that sensitive information isn't inadvertently processed, exposed, or misused. Let's take a closer look at how sensitivity labels work, why they matter, and how you can use them to protect critical files in your ecosystem. Sensitivity labels in Microsoft Purview are essentially metadata tags applied to files, but these tags are far more than just organizational tools. They establish protections at the file level, dictating how a document can be accessed, shared, or even processed by AI tools like Copilot. For example, if a file is labeled confidential, its metadata enforces specific rules, such as limiting access to select users, enforcing encryption, or preventing external sharing. These protections follow the file wherever it's stored, ensuring that security remains consistent across platforms and tools like SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. Without sensitivity labels, files are vulnerable to unintentional exposure. Consider a simple example. Imagine your organization stores financial reports in a shared SharePoint library. These files contain detailed revenue forecasts and cost analyses, but because they lack sensitivity labels, anyone with access to the library, including Copilot, can process and surface them. Now imagine an employee running a generic search for budget priorities. Copilot could pull insights from those financial reports, displaying sensitive data that the employee wasn't authorized to see. This scenario isn't hypothetical. It's exactly the type of risk labels are designed to prevent. Applying sensitivity labels in Purview starts with a straightforward process. First, identify which data types within your organization need protection. Microsoft Purview makes this easier with its ability to scan for sensitive information using built-in classifiers. These classifiers can detect data based on predefined patterns such as credit card numbers, social security numbers, or medical terms. For example, files with customer payment information can be automatically flagged, ensuring they don't slip through the cracks. If your organization has unique data types like proprietary designs or custom account formats, Purview also allows you to create custom classifiers that identify these specific risks. Once you understand what data needs protection, the next step is creating the sensitivity labels. Labels can be tailored to fit your organization's specific needs. For instance, you might define categories like public, internal use only, confidential, and restricted. Each label carries distinct rules for how data in that category should be handled. A restricted label might block certain files from being shared externally or downloaded to unmanaged devices, while an internal use only label might enforce encryption but allow internal sharing. These rules are flexible, making it easy to adapt the labels to different workflows across your business. Let's go through the actual process of creating a label in Purview. The first step is to navigate to the Microsoft 365 Compliance portal, where you can access the Sensitivity Label Management feature. From there, you select Create Label and define the classification. For instance, you might name your label Confidential Financial to clearly designate that it applies to sensitive finance-related files. After giving the label a name, you'll configure its settings. This includes defining who can access the files, whether encryption should be applied, and whether to add visual markers like headers, footers, or watermarks. These visual indicators are particularly useful, as they remind employees to handle files carefully without needing to check metadata manually. Once your label is configured, you must publish it using a label policy. Publishing a sensitivity label makes it available across your environment, so users can apply it to relevant files. These policies also determine who can see and use the labels. For example, you might limit access to specific labels based on roles or departments. For instance, HR may have access to employee PII labels, while the legal team works with confidential legal labels. Publishing ensures that labels are widely deployed while aligning with specific user needs. One key benefit of sensitivity labels is their integration with other Microsoft 365 tools. Once a label is applied, its protections automatically extend across platforms. A file labeled confidential remains protected whether it's stored in SharePoint, shared via email in Outlook, or discussed in a Teams chat. This consistency ensures that files don't lose their protections as they move through different workflows. For example, encryption enforced by a confidential label will restrict unauthorized users from opening the file, even if it's forwarded to them by mistake. Similarly, sharing restrictions applied through sensitivity labels prevent files from being uploaded to third-party applications without authorization. Customizing labels for different types of data allows you to address specific risks faced by your organization. For example, a healthcare organization might use restricted PHI to protect patient health information, ensuring compliance with HIPAA regulations, while a tech company might apply confidential IP to safeguard intellectual property. Tailored labels provide clarity both for administrators managing permissions and for employees handling files. They also help users understand the importance of treating some types of data with greater caution. An important aspect of sensitivity labels is their proactive approach. Applying labels doesn't just respond to security incidents, it prevents them. A properly configured label acts like a rule book the system follows, so even if an employee accidentally places a sensitive file in a broadly accessible folder, the label's restrictions will still protect it. This kind of fail-safe is critical in large environments where human error is inevitable. However, the opposite is also true. Labels that are missing or misapplied create risks. Let's consider another example. A legal department stores drafts of pending litigation materials in a shared directory for internal collaboration. These files should be labeled restricted legal to ensure tight access control. But if they're mislabeled or not labeled at all, an employee outside the legal team could theoretically gain access. Worse, if Copilot indexes those files, it might inadvertently surface data from them in a search, even to someone without relevant clearance. The result could be a serious legal or reputational breach. This highlights why regular reviews of sensitivity labels and policies are an important part of maintaining effective securities. So, how do you prevent these kinds of lapses? Automation plays a big role. Purview allows you to configure automatic labeling rules based on specific criteria. For instance, any file saved to a particular folder could automatically receive a default sensitivity label. Similarly, files containing predefined sensitive information types, like credit card numbers, can be identified and labeled automatically during data scans. Automating this process ensures that even if employees forget to manually label files, critical data still receives the protection it needs. Sensitivity labels also integrate seamlessly with data loss prevention, DLP policies, which we'll explore in depth in the next section. DLP policies use the rules defined by sensitivity labels to prevent unauthorized actions such as sharing, downloading, or exporting files. For example, you can configure a DLP policy to block files labeled top secret from being emailed externally or uploaded to another cloud service. Labels set the boundaries and DLP policies enforce them. Together, they create a layered system where files are protected both at rest and in motion. What makes sensitivity labels particularly effective is their ability to evolve with your organization. Unlike static protection methods that quickly become outdated, labels can be modified or expanded as new risks emerge. For instance, if legal requirements change or your organization expands into a new region with different data privacy laws, you can update sensitivity labels to reflect those shifts. This flexibility ensures your security practices remain aligned with both regulatory requirements and organizational priorities. To summarize, sensitivity labels are more than just tags. They are the foundation of file-level protection. By categorizing data based on sensitivity and linking it to specific protections, they ensure that your files remain secure, regardless of where they're stored or shared. Whether you're safeguarding intellectual property, compliance data, or employee records, labels provide a clear, enforceable framework for managing access and preventing breaches. Now that your files are labeled and categorized, you have the groundwork for stronger security. But labeling alone isn't enough. To fully protect your sensitive data, you need to enforce restrictions on how that data is used, including by Copilot. Let's take a look at how data loss prevention policies build on sensitivity labels to ensure your data stays secure no matter what. Creating data loss prevention policies for Copilot. Labels set the boundaries, DLP policies enforce them. While sensitivity labels define how a file should be protected, data loss prevention, DLP policies, Ensure those protections are followed both by users and AI tools like Copilot. DLP policies are crucial for maintaining control over your organization's sensitive data, as they actively restrict how and where content can be accessed or processed. Without these policies in place, you risk enabling Copilot to inadvertently surface or process files that should remain inaccessible. Let's explore how DLP policies work, how they target Copilot specifically, and the steps to implement them in Microsoft Purview. At its core, a DLP policy acts as a set of rules designed to prevent unauthorized access or accidental exposure of sensitive information. For example, it can block files with specific sensitivity labels, like confidential or top secret, from being shared externally, downloaded to unmanaged devices, or processed by AI workloads such as Copilot. By defining clear conditions for how sensitive data can or cannot be used, DLP policies create guardrails that ensure files labeled with certain protections remain secure. The risks of neglecting DLP policies become even more pronounced when Copilot is part of your environment. As covered earlier, Copilot's semantic search feature allows it to understand the meaning behind user queries and retrieve relevant content. Without a DLP policy in place, Copilot could inadvertently process or index files that align with a user's query, even if those files contain sensitive information. Imagine an AI assistant surfacing a classified product roadmap during a team planning session simply because its context matched a generic query like future priorities. In regulated or high-stakes industries, this could lead to compliance violations, reputational damage, or even legal consequences. To avoid these outcomes, organizations need to define specific DLP rules that target Copilot directly. In Microsoft Purview, this involves setting up policies specifically configured to control how Copilot interacts with sensitive files. One of the most effective ways to do this is by leveraging sensitivity labels as conditions in DLP policy settings. For example, if a file has been labeled top secret, you can create a policy that prohibits Copilot from processing or indexing it under any circumstances. This ensures that the protections already applied at the file level through labels are reinforced by the policy. Configuring a DLP policy for Copilot in Microsoft Purview begins in the data loss prevention solution. To create a new policy, navigate to the Microsoft Purview Compliance portal and select Data Loss Prevention. From there, initiate the process to add a new policy tailored for Copilot. The first step is to name the policy and provide a description, making it clear that this rule is focused on protecting AI workloads or sensitive files from unauthorized processing. Once the policy is named, the next step involves selecting the locations where it should be applied. One important feature of Microsoft Purview is that Copilot itself is now recognized as a configurable location within DLP policies. This means you can target Copilot specifically, ensuring the policy enforces restrictions whenever Copilot interacts with content in Microsoft 365. Alongside Copilot, you can also choose additional locations such as SharePoint, OneDrive, or Exchange to provide comprehensive coverage across your organization. After defining the locations, you'll move on to setting the conditions that trigger the policy. These conditions are where sensitivity labels play a key role. For example, you might configure the policy to target any file with the confidential or top secret label. By specifying these labels, the policy ensures files marked with sensitive classifications will follow the designated protections whenever Copilot or other workloads attempt to process them. You can also add supplementary conditions such as detecting specific types of sensitive information like social security numbers or financial data within the file's content. These additional layers of restriction provide flexibility in how policies impact both labeled and unlabeled files. Once conditions are defined, the next step is to configure the actions that the policy will enforce when its rules are triggered. In the context of Copilot, these actions typically involve blocking the file from being processed or accessed. For example, if a user's search query matches the context of a restricted file, the DLP policy can prevent Copilot from surfacing that file in the search results. Other possible actions include notifying administrators, alerting users that the file is protected, or restricting the file from being shared externally. These actions ensure that even if sensitive data is accessed within the same system, its usage remains tightly controlled. Let's break this down further with an example. Imagine your organization has a repository of files labeled top secret that stores classified financial projections and business strategies. By creating a DLP policy, targeting these labels, and integrating Copilot as the applicable location, you can ensure that none of these top secret files are indexed or processed by the AI tool. You might also configure the policy to display a user notification whenever someone includes the restricted file in a query, reminding them that the content isn't authorized for general access. Additionally, the policy could send an alert to administrators, enabling them to monitor attempted interactions with the protected data. Once you've configured the key settings, the final step in creating a DLP policy is testing it to ensure it works as intended. Before enforcing restrictions broadly, Microsoft Purview allows you to operate policies in test mode. In this mode, the policy logs how often its conditions are triggered without actively blocking or restricting access. For example, you might notice that Copilot attempts to process restricted files during specific types of queries. By analyzing this data, you can fine-tune your conditions and settings to avoid excessive false positives or unintended blocks. Testing is particularly important when applying DLP policies to Copilot because of its AI-driven search capabilities. Unlike traditional systems, Copilot doesn't rely on exact keywords or terms, which means it can interpret queries in ways you might not expect. Fine-tuning policy conditions ensures that sensitive files are consistently protected without unnecessarily restricting non-sensitive workflows. For instance, you wouldn't want a policy to block Copilot from processing general internal documents simply because they share certain keywords with restricted files. Once testing confirms the policy works as intended, it's ready to be enforced across your environment. From that point on, the policy actively prevents unauthorized actions based on its defined conditions. For example, files labeled top secret would be excluded from Copilot's semantic indexing, ensuring that no query, no matter how relevant, could surface them. This proactive protection guarantees compliance and reduces the risk of accidental data leaks through AI processing. Building effective DLP policies for Copilot requires balancing security needs with the practicalities of enabling productivity. While it's essential to restrict access to classified or highly sensitive files, you don't want to create so many barriers that Copilot loses its usefulness. Customizing policies to focus on specific sensitivity labels, conditions, and file types allows your organization to maintain tight control over critical data without hindering access to less sensitive files or resources. The key takeaway here is that DLP policies don't just complement sensitivity labels, they enforce them. They ensure that the labels you've applied to secure sensitive files are respected not only by users but also by AI tools like Copilot. Together, sensitivity labels and DLP policies form a comprehensive system that protects sensitive data from unauthorized processing, accidental exposure, and compliance violations. Now, you might be wondering, how do you confirm that these policies are working effectively in the real world? Policies are only as good as their enforcement, and even the most carefully designed rules need periodic checks to ensure they're functioning as expected. In the next section, we'll focus on how to test and monitor your DLP policies, making sure they're not only protecting your data, but also aligning with the day-to-day workflows of your users. Let's explore how to verify your policies to achieve peace of mind and continued compliance. Testing your policies to ensure Copilot compliance. Even the best policies fail if they're not tested. Creating data loss prevention, DLP policies, is a crucial step to securing your data, but if those policies aren't thoroughly tested, gaps can remain. These gaps may allow tools like Microsoft Copilot to inadvertently access sensitive information, even when protections are in place. Testing ensures your policies function as intended and catch any potential oversights before they can lead to serious incidents. Let's consider what happens when policies go untested. Imagine a company that sets up DLP rules to block sensitive HR records from being accessed or shared externally. The policies seem well designed, but administrators never validate them in practice. A month later, an employee uses Copilot to search for project feedback, and the AI unintentionally surfaces salary information from those HR documents in the results. Because the policies hadn't been tested, they failed to restrict Copilot's access, leading to an exposure of sensitive data. This scenario highlights the importance of proactive validation and why assuming policies will work as configured isn't enough. To avoid such risks, testing must be built into your security strategy. Microsoft Purview provides tools that make it easier to evaluate and refine your DLP policies effectively. Testing doesn't begin after a breach. It's a proactive measure to confirm your security framework is aligned with real-world workflows and AI interactions like those associated with Copilot. By running tests during the configuration stage, you can verify all conditions and rules behave as intended without disrupting daily operations. The testing process in Microsoft Purview is methodical. It starts with creating a policy specifically for the data you want protected. Let's say you want to prevent Copilot from processing files labeled confidential. In Purview, you would navigate to the Data Loss Prevention section and select Create Policy. While setting up the policy, you choose Copilot as the target location for enforcement. This ensures that the policy specifically applies to any data Copilot attempts to access or process. After defining locations, you configure the conditions that trigger your policy. For instance, targeting files labeled with sensitivity tags like confidential or restricted could be a core condition. You might add more specific rules like identifying documents containing financial terms, social security numbers, or other sensitive information types. These conditions are critical because they determine what data the policy will seek to restrict. When designing a DLP policy for Copilot, it's essential to think ahead about how queries might interact with various file types and contexts. Once your policy is configured, you don't launch it immediately. Instead, Microsoft Purview allows you to test policies in test mode. This mode is designed to simulate enforcement without actually blocking access or notifying users. Instead of taking action, the system generates logs, showing how often the policy's conditions would have been triggered. For example, you might find that Copilot attempted to process hundreds of confidential files during its semantic indexing activities. These logged interactions provide critical insights into how well your policy aligns with actual user behavior and where additional adjustments might be needed. Testing your policies in test mode also provides an opportunity to fine-tune conditions. Policies that generate too many false positives, for example, blocking non-sensitive files mistakenly associated with a restricted term, can create frustration for users. On the other hand, policies that fail to trigger when sensitive data is accessed may leave room for security vulnerabilities. Microsoft Purview's Activity Explorer is a valuable resource during this stage. The tool provides detailed reports on policy triggers, helping you identify trends and patterns. For instance, the reports might reveal that Copilot accesses particular file shares more frequently than anticipated, prompting you to examine permissions in those areas. Another essential resource for testing DLP policies is the Content Explorer in Microsoft Purview. While the Activity Explorer focuses on interactions and violations, Content Explorer provides a more detailed look into your data landscape. It shows where sensitive files are stored, how they're labeled, and whether they meet your defined conditions. This visibility allows administrators to compare policy design against the actual configuration of files, ensuring there's no disconnect between the two. For example, if the DLP policy targets confidential files, Content Explorer can confirm whether those labels have been applied consistently across the organization. Policies designed to restrict Copilot specifically can also benefit from restricted content discovery features. Microsoft Purview includes an option to limit Copilot's ability to process data from certain sites entirely, adding another layer of control. This feature allows administrators to set restrict content or wide search through a simple PowerShell command. When enabled, this restriction prevents Copilot from utilizing specific sites even if permissions allow access. It's important to note that this command doesn't change who can access the data. It simply blocks Copilot from using it to ground its responses. Running tests with this setting ensures that restricted sites aren't accidentally included in AI workloads. Through testing, administrators can not only verify that policies are effective, but also identify data sources that require additional oversight. For example, if test logs reveal areas with frequent policy violations, such as mislabeled files or overly broad access permissions, these become priority areas to address. Microsoft Purview makes these insights actionable by linking policy monitoring tools with easy-to-apply fixes. Administrators can quickly refine conditions, adjust sensitivity labels, or modify scope to align policies with ongoing business needs. Regular policy reviews are another critical component of testing. Data environments are not static. New files are created, existing files move to different locations, and sensitivity requirements evolve. For instance, a departmental reorganization might shift control over certain documents, or a new compliance requirement could mandate additional protections for specific data types. Without regular policy updates, even well-functioning DLP configurations may become outdated, leaving your organization vulnerable. Microsoft Purview makes it possible to schedule routine audits, ensuring policies are reviewed and adjusted at regular intervals. This process maintains alignment between your security framework and your organization's changing data landscape. Testing DLP policies offers more than just technical security. It provides peace of mind. Knowing that every file labeled restricted or confidential is accounted for and properly protected builds confidence in your organization's ability to manage sensitive data securely, even with AI tools like Copilot in play. It also reassures users that their data won't be misused or exposed by automated systems, fostering trust in the technology driving everyday workflows. Testing doesn't just safeguard data, it also enhances collaboration between security teams and end users. When policies work as intended, they create a seamless balance between protecting sensitive files and enabling productivity. For example, test reports might reveal that while a strict download restriction is effective for external collaborators, it frustrates internal users working on shared projects. This insight allows administrators to refine policies, easing restrictions where appropriate without sacrificing security. Thorough testing also minimizes business disruptions. An untested policy may inadvertently block access to files vital to an ongoing project, slowing down operations and frustrating employees. By testing policies in advance, you can uncover and resolve these issues before they become roadblocks. Testing ensures that policies are not only secure but also practical for day-to-day workflows. It allows security measures to enhance productivity rather than hinder it, keeping tools like Copilot both secure and useful. Ultimately, testing your DLP policies ensures that Copilot compliance isn't left to chance. It confirms that every condition works as expected, sensitivity labels perform their intended function, and AI tools stay within the boundaries you've defined. With Microsoft Purview's robust testing tools, administrators can identify gaps, adjust settings, and ensure overall effectiveness without impacting live environments. Testing isn't the final step, but an ongoing process that reinforces your organization's commitment to security. Finally, testing sets the stage for the delicate balance required between AI functionality and data protection. Too many restrictions risk making tools like Copilot unusable, stifling productivity, and creating user resistance. Too few restrictions open the door to data exposure and compliance risks. Testing helps you strike this balance, ensuring sensitive files are protected while enabling Copilot to deliver value where it's needed. As we move into the next section, we'll explore how to balance security and productivity effectively with Copilot. While locking down data is critical, an overly restrictive approach can diminish the AI's usefulness. Finding this equilibrium allows organizations to unlock Copilot's full potential without compromising data security. Let's focus on how to achieve that balance. Balancing data security with Copilot's functionality. Too many restrictions can make Copilot unusable, so how do you strike the right balance? This is one of the most critical challenges organizations face when implementing advanced tools like Copilot. On the one hand, protecting sensitive data is non-negotiable. On the other, overly strict security settings can block Copilot from performing its intended job, frustrating the end users who depend on it for productivity. To get the most out of Copilot while maintaining strong security practices, a balanced approach is essential. The fundamental challenge here is ensuring data security without sacrificing functionality. Copilot uses powerful semantic search capabilities to surface relevant information across your organization's files. This capability is highly valuable in increasing productivity and collaboration. However, it's also what makes Copilot particularly sensitive to data security gaps. Strict restrictions like blocking large access areas or overly aggressive permission settings can hinder Copilot from pulling valuable files or insights. When users find the tool limited or difficult to use, they're likely to grow frustrated or even stop relying on it altogether. To prevent these frustrations while protecting sensitive data, it's helpful to customize restrictions based on the specific needs of different groups in your organization. Not every department handles the same types of data or requires the same level of protection. For example, the finance team deals with highly sensitive records such as payroll information or working financial strategies. Strict controls on Copilot's access to these files make sense to maintain compliance and prevent the accidental exposure of private business data. Conversely, the marketing department often works with less sensitive public-facing material like advertising drafts or campaign plans. Giving marketing broader access to Copilot allows them to utilize its features fully without unnecessary restrictions. By tailoring security policies to departments or user groups, organizations can strike a balance between protection and usability. When defining access levels, prioritizing sensitive data is another effective strategy. You don't need equally stringent protections for every file in your system. Instead, the goal should be to identify and apply the strongest security measures to the data that poses the highest risk of exposure or misuse. This typically includes files containing financial information, personally identifiable information, PII, or confidential business plans. For example, legal contracts or internal audit reports should be tightly restricted both in terms of who can access them and how tools like Copilot can process them. Meanwhile, less critical data, such as meeting notes or general team updates, might be classified with looser restrictions. This distinction ensures that your most valuable data remains protected while still enabling Copilot to perform effectively in less sensitive areas. To achieve this level of control, organizations frequently use sensitivity labels. Sensitivity labels not only classify files as public, confidential, or restricted, but also trigger specific data loss prevention (DLP) policies that define how Copilot interacts with that data. For instance, a file labeled confidential legal could be blocked from Copilot altogether, while files with a public label remain accessible. This approach helps maintain a high level of protection for files that need it, while avoiding unnecessary barriers to collaboration and productivity in other areas. Customizing restrictions and prioritizing data sensitivity requires an adaptable system. Business needs and the data landscape are continuously evolving, making regular reviews of your policies critical. Data that wasn't considered sensitive 6 months ago might now fall under stricter regulatory requirements. Similarly, as workflows change or new tools like Copilot are adopted, users may need greater clarity about which files are accessible and why. Running regular audits ensures your existing policies meet these changing needs. For example, auditing sensitivity labels ensures they're correctly applied to all files, especially new ones users upload to shared locations. It also helps identify mislabeled or unprotected files that Copilot might incorrectly process. Audits are particularly effective in highlighting areas where policies conflict with user workflows. End users often experience firsthand where a security policy hinders productivity or limits their ability to collaborate. Gathering feedback from these users provides valuable insights into how policies affect their day-to-day tasks. For instance, if employees report that Copilot can't pull meeting summaries or relevant team updates because restrictions were set too broadly, adjustments may be needed to improve accessibility without compromising security. Listening to this feedback and iteratively refining your policies ensures smoother usability across any workgroup. Another layer to consider is leveraging automation within policy management. Sensitivity labels can automatically apply to documents based on rules set by administrators. For example, any file uploaded to a specific SharePoint folder can automatically receive a restricted label without the user having to manually apply it. Alongside this, DLP policies can operate in tandem to enforce rules based on these labels. This means that files containing sensitive information, such as social security numbers, will trigger restrictions automatically, even if end users forget to add protective measures manually. Automating these processes minimizes human error while reducing the effort needed to apply consistent protections across large datasets. Granularity is also important in enabling Copilot's functionality while protecting sensitive areas. Copilot doesn't need access to every file or repository in your environment to deliver value. Some organizations start by enabling Copilot to process data in specific low-risk locations. Over time, they can expand access as they gain greater control over sensitivity labeling and policy refinement. For instance, a company might initially allow Copilot to index only public marketing materials, gradually incorporating department-specific sites like operations or HR, as DLP policies are tested and strengthened. Restricting access incrementally prevents oversharing while keeping productivity tools available where they provide the most benefit. Effective monitoring plays an ongoing role in maintaining the balance between security and usability. Copilot usage patterns provide a wealth of data for understanding how users interact with the tool and identifying areas for improvement. Are users encountering too many restrictions? Are certain locations showing unexpectedly high instances of flagged actions? These insights guide administrators in refining not only access patterns but also training materials to teach users how to work securely with Copilot. For example, a spike in failed file access attempts might indicate the need for user education on aligning queries to accessible content rather than pointing to weaknesses in the tool itself. User training is another essential element to maintaining this balance. Even with the best policies in place, users must understand how to work securely when using AI tools. Training on data sensitivity labels, what they mean, and how to use them ensures employees classify documents accurately. Explaining the purpose of DLP policies and showing how they safeguard business data helps employees understand why certain restrictions exist. Connected to this is the importance of communicating why Copilot's functionality requires certain boundaries, helping users appreciate the balance between productivity and compliance. The path to balance involves constantly iterating on security practices as new challenges emerge and business needs evolve. For example, regulatory requirements may shift, or users might provide feedback indicating that current restrictions are preventing important workflows. Adapting to these changes involves regularly reviewing rules for sensitivity labels, refining DLP policies, and analyzing any gaps discovered through audit reports or monitoring tools. This agility ensures that even as new tools and data practices evolve, policies remain both effective and user-friendly. What makes this approach work is its flexibility. While restricting all Copilot functions may seem like a safer choice, it would effectively neutralize the productivity benefits the tool offers. Instead, organizations must prioritize the protection of high-risk areas while enabling employees to work freely with low-risk data. By customizing policies for departments, applying targeted sensitivity labels, and collecting regular user feedback, you can fine-tune an approach that suits both business objectives and regulatory compliance requirements. Achieving security and productivity isn't about locking everything down or throwing caution to the wind, it's about striking a balance. Copilot has incredible potential to boost efficiency and collaboration, but only if implemented thoughtfully. A balanced approach ensures its benefits don't come at the cost of data security. Through regular audits, role-specific restrictions, and sensitivity-based rules, organizations can ensure they fully harness Copilot's capabilities while keeping sensitive files safe. With the right tools and practices in place, you can create an environment where Copilot enhances workflows while remaining compliant with your organization's security standards. So, what steps should you take today to protect your data for Copilot? Let's walk through the key actions that will build a secure and efficient AI environment, ensuring sensitive information stays safe while fully unlocking the productivity benefits Copilot has to offer. Immediate steps to secure your data for Copilot. What can you do right now to keep your data safe? Securing your data for Copilot isn't a process you can afford to delay. Every moment you wait increases the risk of sensitive information being inadvertently accessed or exposed. Fortunately, there are clear and immediate steps you can take today to reduce these risks and ensure Copilot operates within safe, well-defined boundaries. Let's break it down. First, start by identifying sensitive data across your organization. This means figuring out where your critical files are stored, what types of sensitive information they contain, and who currently has access to them. Microsoft Purview provides tools that help streamline this process. Its data security posture management features can scan your environment, looking for files that contain predefined sensitive information types, such as social security numbers, credit card details, or financial records. These scans are helpful not only for regulatory compliance, but also for uncovering potential vulnerabilities in your data storage and sharing practices. If you're not labeling or protecting sensitive data, it's essentially operating without guardrails, leaving it vulnerable to exposure. After identifying these files, The next step is applying sensitivity labels. Sensitivity labels go beyond merely categorizing data. They enforce protections like access controls, encryption, and sharing restrictions. For example, a file labeled confidential may automatically be encrypted and limited to a group of authorized users, while a public file remains accessible to anyone. Using sensitivity labels ensures that key protections stay with the file, no matter where it's stored or how it's shared. Purview makes it simple to automate the labeling process. You can configure rules that automatically apply labels to files based on their content, location, or the sensitivity of information they contain. This automation minimizes human error and ensures that even new files are protected the moment they're created or uploaded. Once your data is labeled, protect it further by creating data loss prevention (DLP) policies specifically tailored for Copilot. DLP policies are the backbone of your data protection strategy. They restrict how sensitive files can be accessed, shared, or processed, including by AI systems like Copilot. For example, if files labeled top secret should never be indexed or processed by Copilot, a DLP policy can automatically block those interactions. Similarly, policies can restrict sensitive files from being downloaded to unmanaged devices or emailed outside the organization. By defining these rules, you set clear enforceable boundaries for how sensitive data is handled. Establishing DLP policies is relatively straightforward in Microsoft Purview. Start by identifying the locations where your sensitive files are stored, such as SharePoint, Teams, or OneDrive, and add Copilot as a location for policy enforcement. Then configure the rules by targeting specific sensitivity labels. For instance, you could create a policy that prevents Copilot from indexing files labeled as restricted while allowing access to files labeled internal use only. Purview's flexibility makes it possible to design policies that target only what's necessary, avoiding overly broad restrictions that could limit Copilot's functionality. Creating and applying these protections is essential, but acting quickly is just as important. Sensitive files that aren't labeled and controlled today remain at risk of exposure. Imagine a scenario in which an employee's search query in Copilot unintentionally surfaces an unrestricted financial report or confidential HR file. That risk becomes a real issue if these files haven't been secured with a label or if a DLP policy hasn't been established to block access. By taking immediate action, you can prevent these types of incidents before they occur. Speed matters in this context, not only to maintain compliance with data regulations, but also to build trust within your organization that sensitive information won't be mishandled. Here's a checklist you can follow today to begin securing your data for Copilot 1. Assess your data environment. Use a tool like Microsoft Purview to scan your systems for sensitive or misconfigured data. Focus on identifying files that contain critical information, including financial details, PII, or business secrets. 2. Apply sensitivity labels. Once you've identified your sensitive data, apply appropriate labels, such as confidential or internal use only. Ensure these labels enforce restrictions like encryption, access control, or download limitations. 3. Automate labeling. Configure rules in Purview to automatically apply sensitivity labels to files that meet certain criteria. For example, files containing social security numbers or customer payment details should automatically receive a restricted label. 4. Create DLP policies tomorrow. Establish policies designed specifically for Copilot. These should target files with your most sensitive labels and enforce specific restrictions, such as blocking AI processing or external sharing. 5. Test your policies. Before deploying your DLP policies broadly, use Purview's test mode to simulate enforcement. This allows you to validate the policies and identify any gaps or false positives without disrupting workflows. 6. Enable restricted content discovery for Copilot. Use PowerShell or admin tools to prevent Copilot from indexing specific high-risk sites, such as those containing legal contracts or classified files. 7. Educate users. Train your employees on sensitivity labels, file-level protections, and how to use Copilot responsibly. Help them understand which queries may be restricted and how to handle sensitive data correctly. 8. Monitor and refine. Enable Purview's monitoring tools to track policy enforcement and review reports from Activity Explorer. Use these insights to fine-tune your protections and address emerging risks. By following these steps, you establish a strong foundation for securing your data while maintaining Copilot's functionality. However, immediate action is only part of the solution. Ongoing maintenance and updates are just as important to ensure your protections remain effective over time. Data environments evolve, workflows shift, and regulatory requirements change. For example, a new compliance law might require stricter access controls for PII, or your organization might adopt new tools and integrations that impact how Copilot interacts with data. Without regular updates to your labeling and DLP policies, even the best protections can become outdated. Schedule periodic reviews as part of your data governance strategy. These reviews should include checking that sensitivity labels are applied consistently across your organization, and that all files are protected according to your policies. For instance, newly created files or files uploaded to shared locations should be scanned and labeled as part of routine maintenance. Policy reviews also help audit access patterns, ensuring no unauthorized users or tools have bypassed restrictions. Another critical aspect of ongoing maintenance is user training. As employees join the organization or adopt new workflows, they need guidance on working securely with tools like Copilot. Regular training sessions can ensure that users understand how to handle sensitive files correctly, identify risks, and use sensitivity labels effectively. It also helps reinforce the idea that while Copilot is an incredibly powerful tool, its functionality depends on how well protections are implemented. Being proactive in your data governance doesn't just protect sensitive information. It prepares your organization to thrive in the era of AI-driven productivity. AI tools like Copilot are designed to empower employees, enhance collaboration, and streamline workflows, but they can only do so in a secure and governed environment. By applying sensitivity labels, creating enforcement policies, and maintaining regular reviews, you ensure that Copilot operates within safe, well-defined boundaries. As a final takeaway, remember that enabling productivity and protecting data don't have to be at odds with each other. Successful organizations find ways to achieve both. With tools like Microsoft Purview, you have the ability to tailor protections, automate labeling processes, and build a system that balances security needs with usability. These actions empower your teams to work faster and smarter with Copilot while maintaining trust that sensitive files are secure. Now let's wrap up with one final thought. The steps you take today not only secure your data, but also set the stage for building a resilient, AI-ready organization. Copilot is a powerful tool, but its effectiveness depends entirely on how well your data practices support it. By following the strategies covered in this video, you're not just protecting your data, you're unlocking the full potential of AI while staying ahead of future risks. Copilot is a powerful tool, but it's only as secure as your data practices. By identifying sensitive files, applying proper sensitivity labels, and creating data loss prevention (DLP) policies, you create a secure foundation for Copilot to operate within safe boundaries. These steps aren't optional. They're essential to protect your organization from risks like accidental data exposure or compliance violations. Take action today. Use Microsoft Purview to scan for sensitive data, configure protections, and test your policies. These proactive measures ensure your data stays secure while unlocking the full potential of Copilot. With the right tools, you can maximize productivity without compromising security.